So, I would like to welcome my guest today, Sharan Kafoa. Sharan spent over 20 years in the corporate world before her health forcibly encouraged her to reevaluate her priorities. She is now a wife, a mother, and an integrative nutrition women's health coach, specializing in hormones, specifically menopause, and natural anti aging solutions, which is something I think we're all looking for when we get to a certain age. She is uniquely positioned to bring her personal experience and knowledge to women who are struggling with life. Sharan brings her knowledge and her experience of being a mother at 40, her infertility, premature menopause, and other hormonal and autoimmune challenges over the years to work with her clients. When it comes to facing hormonal and aging challenges, Sharan is able to combine her own experience with her training to support her clients. Her mission is to empower women to have a better relationship with themselves and to help them piece together their own health jigsaw in order to live a life full of energy and to feel in control of their health. Sharan is also one of my incredible soul sisters, and I am ever grateful that she's joining me today. So, welcome, Sharan.
Well, hello, beautiful. It is just a divine thrill to be here. Thank you.
I'm just honored that you're my first guest. And I'm sure you'll be back on again at some point in the future. So, I would like you to give me a little bit of the background and for the listeners of how you found health coaching. What led you to it?
Mm, that is always a deep, well, oftentimes a deep question, not always. And I think often we move into these sorts of roles after we've had our own trauma or challenges or, been put in those situations where we've had to muddle through. And then, so you mentioned my tick list of overachieving when it comes to health issues for women. That led me into wellness about 12 years ago generally. I ended up unexpectedly caring for my elderly father here at home full-time for 5.5 years. And after my darling passed away, I was in that position where I suddenly thought, what am I going to do now? Because Dad, bless him, had gone on to somewhere else. My son was in senior high school and he didn't need me. My husband was in a job that he loved and was doing really well, so he didn't really need me. So I actually got to sit there and think, what about me?
What a huge question.
It's a massive question. And I'm getting goosebumps just, talking to you about this. And it was really confronting and really hard because as women, we generally are always putting others first. And here I was thinking about putting myself first and thinking about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Because I think I'm planning on having, another 40 odd years. And that's, I've still got so much that I want to contribute. And I also thought too that, am I allowed to say shit?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Fuck yes, you can. You know it's me.
I also thought too, I have been through
Spiritual sailor.
I have also been through so much that, I now know that I didn't necessarily need to go through. And it was, I can't not try and contribute to serve others, to actually, as you put it so beautifully when we spoke a while ago, that river of life, catching these women, these beautiful souls before they jump into that river, rather than trying to pull them out when they're so far down that they're almost lost in the rapids. And so that was kind of what led me to think about, well, what do I love doing? I love the world of wellness. I'm a real science geek. I'd spent time in medicine and surgery way back, and I just was fascinated. And then, up popped the opportunity to study health coaching. And so I thought, oh, that sounds like fun. And so I dived into that. And then a little while later, an advanced specialty in hormone health came up. And I thought, well, that could be interesting.
Mm.
And so I took that up. And that was how I eventually found my way into being a health coach.
Beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think that is really something that all of, I think anyone who's gone through life experiences some of that at some point or another. Just to go back a little bit, I'd like to ask you about that. You mentioned that, obviously your beautiful pa had passed and your son was less needing you, and so was your husband. How did that feel in terms of your transition to go from being this needed person to going, oh, hang on. What was that transition like?
It was a challenge.
Mm.
But I think as women, we go through all of these transitions, not only hormonally from, when we're born to when we're young girls, to then puberty, to then hitting, our 20s, and then child rearing and all that brings, to then transitioning again through menopause and into that, last phase of life. And all that comes with that, as I said, I think with society and the way we're brought up, and I think we do it naturally anyway. We are just drawn to be nurturers.
Yeah.
And when you hit that point where, like my son was nearing 18, so it's kind of like, well, he's a grown up-ish. And my husband was doing his thing, and it wasn't so much they didn't need me, because I think in some ways, I would like to think in some ways, they will always,
Of course,
need me, but there was no real need for me to be hands-on anymore. And, like Dad was very hands-on. When you're bringing up your children, they're very hands-on. Sometimes your partners can be very hands-on, depending what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And suddenly it was about, as I said, me. And it was almost an untethering. It was almost a kind of a dislocation.
What a beautiful word. Yeah.
From all that I had been doing. And, I'll be honest, when I fell pregnant at 39, I hadn't necessarily thought about being a mum. It was a wee bit of a surprise. I fell pregnant very quickly, which was another surprise. And so for me, it was sort of this constant like, oh, what do I do now? And oh, what do I do now? And figuring it out. And then, at that point, it's sitting with myself and thinking about all of I suppose the beautiful things, the achievements that I'd had with bringing my child to that stage, and my husband getting to that point in his career, and the way I'd had to support him, and the house and the environment and all of those things, and, looking after my dad and making sure he had a good quality of life. Sitting and reflecting on those achievements, and then I think reflecting on what I can now do moving forward for other people. So I suppose in some ways there's still that nurturing going on, but it's how I can serve others, how I can make an impact, because I see women kind of living their lives doing exactly what I did way back when. And I think, no, honey, please don't. And did that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely love it. I think it's beautiful. The thing that you are describing here is something that we talk about within the work that I do. Now there's 4 stages of womanhood. We used to sort of talk about the maiden, mother, crone. The way that we work now tends to be more maiden, mother, marga, crone. So the maiden is obviously our pre-menstruation years. Mothering is any time from menstruation until we've either, I guess, given birth and raised human children, or we tend to be in that more productive place in our life. But because we are now living so much longer, and realistically, those crone years tend to be, I guess, the last 10, 20 years of life. But we're leaving motherhood a lot of the times in our, 40s, 50s. And then we've still got another potentially 30 years before we're hitting crone. That time in our life we call Marga, which is the community mother. So that is exactly what you're talking about. It is your transition from
Mm.
mother into how do I take this knowledge and serve my community? How do I share that wisdom with my community? In a going outward phase. I think crone, or the way that I interpret crone, is more when people seek you out for your knowledge because you're less mobile. Whereas this way, it is you still going out into your community and sharing that knowledge and taking it out there. And I've certainly seen that transition for you over the last however many years. What is it, 3, 4 years now that you've been studying health
Mm.
coaching?
Yes, about
Or
that time.
been a health coach as well. So, when you look at obviously all of this lived wisdom that you've gained and the learned experience, now that I guess you've qualified what you knew from lived wisdom through the piece of paper, how have you found that the two have married together?
Great question. I think what it allowed me to do was make sense of what I'd gone through 20 years ago. So when I had most of my health crises, because I'm an overachiever, 20, 25 years ago, they didn't talk about stress or nutrition or lifestyle or meditation or mindfulness, aromatherapy. They didn't really talk about any of that. These were modalities I discovered further down the track. And through my studies, I was able to literally sit here and go, well, shit. Why didn't somebody tell me this 20 years ago? Why didn't somebody explain this to me all those years ago? Why, it made sense to me now. I could look back and understand exactly why what happened. I could chart it back to, well, I was living and doing this, and this was going on in my life at the time, and this is what had been going on. So again, my body had been giving me little whispers that things weren't quite right. But because I was living life as you're supposed to, those inverted commas, and, I just ignored it and ignored it. So I was actually able to track it, and pretty much everything suddenly made sense to me. Everything fell in like that jigsaw piece is falling into place. And even when I went through an early menopause after my son was born, there are so many conversations that women don't get to have about their health, about what happens to your body when you fall pregnant, what happens to your body after you give birth, and all that goes on around that. We don't talk about the fact that childbirth is hellishly hard on your body. Never mind, the whole emotional psyche roller coaster that you go on. Nutritionally, pregnancy and childbirth pretty much strips us. And unless you're going into it fully armed and knowing this and prepared for it, what can happen subsequently, women often find they're having suddenly thyroid issues, they're having adrenal issues, or like me, I went into early menopause. But when I went through the menopause, I didn't know it was menopause. So doing my studies, I was able to go back and go, oh, yeah, makes sense. And it would be very easy for me to sit here and get quite bitter and live with regret about what happened, because I know that with a few simple changes, a lot of what happened needn't have happened. I would still have my thyroid, for example. But rather than do that, because that would just take up way too much energy and it's not productive. It's going, okay, without that lived experience, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't be able to bring my heart, mind, body, soul into my work with women.
And I think that's a beautiful point, that bitterness really can eat us up from the inside without having done some of that internal work that allows us to see the gift in our challenges. And when we're in the messy middle, of course, we're not going to see the gift, because
No.
nobody wants to be told we're in the middle of it, that this too shall pass and it is as it is, because that makes you want to slap someone like, nope, nothing else.
Oh, absolutely.
But let's go into that part then. You know, you mentioned that you were able to park the bitterness and sweeten it with that mind body soul connection, and with that understanding that it has guided you to be able to do the deep work that you do with the clients you serve. So, what is your understanding or idea of spirituality? And how do you think that differentiates your expression in the world?
That's an awesome question. So I was brought up in a mildly religious household. As my dad would say, I was Church of England, or C of E, which to him meant Christmas and Easter. Um, to me, reflecting on that side now, there is that part of me that loves the deep silence, the deep, what's the word? The deep sense of being that I get. Not that I go into churches very often, but if I do, especially when I'm traveling, outside of those experiences, to me, it's more about being in tune with myself and my environment. And, you know, in those moments where I have those, let's just say those angsty moments, because I don't think they're confined to just teenage years. You can just have angsty moments at any time. You know,
Absolutely.
for me, yes, you know, there's the meditation, there's the journaling, and I love all of those. But what really connects me back to me, and I think this is what spirituality does for me, is either going and immersing myself in water, or if I can't get to the beach or a pool or whatever, but beach preferably, is just going and lying flat on the grass, looking up into the sky and just allowing it all to just evaporate. And that to me is kind of spiritual.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And what do you think that does for you in terms of your work? How do you manage to weave that part of you in? Because I don't believe we can ever silo those parts of ourselves. I think we are spiritual beings, and that will naturally inform what we bring in. So, how do you bring that full mind, body, spirit the way that you work with your clients?
I think it allows me to show up exactly as I am, who I am, and tap into, as you say, all of that lived experience. It allows me to bring compassion. It allows me to bring in that empathy. It allows me to really understand where my client is and what she's dealing with. It opens my heart to them and allows me to meet them exactly where they are.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And what do you think is, I guess, your unique selling point? If you had to, I hate that word because it makes us, you know, feel like we're marketing ourselves, which I guess we are, but I don't know, marketing feels skeevy. What is that thing in you that you think attracts your clients better than anything else?
I think it does go back to that experience, the fact that I've lived it. I know how completely frickin' awful it can be when you are so drained of energy that you can barely lift your head up off the pillow, but your kid is crying and you've got to go do something else. And it's that, you dredge it up. I've got goosebumps talking about this now. You're dredging it up from your toes just to get yourself up out of bed and get on. I've also had a lot of mental health issues, especially around when my son was born, because my mother died when he was 10 months old. So, dealing with a lot of stress, dealing with life when you feel like complete and utter shit, when you can barely string together the fact that you've got to get out of bed, get your underwear on the right way, and get going. I know what it's like to go through menopause when you've got no idea suddenly what this body, it's like, what the fuck is going on? What is it doing to me now? And one minute you feel great and really good, and the next minute your mind's gotten completely psycho bitch, and you turn around and you suddenly put on 5 kilos. I mean, it's what, so I think that, combined with my heart, my broad shoulders, and my sparkling personality.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. And in terms of, I know you've sort of mentioned how you got into health coaching. For me, I often say that I didn't choose kinesiology. It chose me, and it opened this door and led me down this path that I never knew existed before I walked through that door. What's been your experience in terms of, I guess, finding health coaching, and what do you think that door has led you to?
Um, mm, it certainly wasn't a door that I was ever aware of. And I think what it says to me is that there's always something out there for you. And where it's led me is to, well, firstly, I've met some incredible women all over the world. And I love that in some ways kinesiology brought us back together. And I love the work that you do as a kinesiologist. You have helped me immeasurably. I don't know that I would be here if it weren't for you and the work that you do. So
Well,
thank you.
back at
Immensely.
you,
I'm
because
grateful.
I don't think I'd be where I am without you. So, sisters coming together, that's what
I
we
know
need to
that's
do.
it, right? um, I think it's allowed me to really take a different perspective on life and how we live, and all of these, we're so led by social media and marketing and trying to keep up with the Kardashians and all the rest of it. And if I think back to the before me, I saw a lot of these sorts of things as that's just how we're living life. That's just what you do. And isn't that what everyone does? And it's that usual thing of, it's so much easier to go with the flow without understanding that really what we need to do is just take a step back and just be curious and go, well, actually, is this something that I need to do for me? Is this something that's going to work for me and my life? And is this going to work for me in what I want to get out of life? And it's, I think, led in a lot of ways to a deeper sense of wisdom, or at least it's allowed me to tap into a lot more inner wisdom. And I kind of, quite often when I'm talking with people, I'll say things and I'll think, oh, wow, where did that come from? But I think we all have this incredible innate wisdom that we lose touch with, or as I say, the goddess, we all have her inside of us. It's just that we don't often listen to her
Mm.
or tap into her wisdom and her power, because she gets layered over with life, kids, stuff, shit, you know, da, 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 da. So doing this has allowed me, I guess, to tap back into that. And I actually, you know, I love the fact that I'm at this stage of life because, you know, I want to tell women that it's actually pretty good, that there's so much to look forward to. But what you need to start doing is you need to actually start preparing for it. It's like you get ready before, you know, you decide to have a baby. And so you start thinking about, you know, what you need to do. Same for this last transition into the Marga, as you say, which is beautiful. You know, you need to think about how you want that to look. So, you know, if you start thinking about and preparing for it before you hit perimenopause, it can make such a world of difference when you're through it. But oftentimes, again, we don't know these things until we're going through them and doing. And that's what it's kind of allowed me to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's beautiful. You mentioned in that it's also led you to meet all of these incredible women
Mm.
and people all around the world. What is your what does that give you? What does that connection with other women, other health coaches, other people in this field, what does that give you?
Oh, it's two examples. So this morning I had I'm part of a health coach mastermind, and it's predominantly US based, but there are a few of us here in Australia. And we had a meeting this morning, and it's always a beautiful thing when you're hanging out with like-minded people who have similar values, who care about certain things. And we've created a beautifully safe space for all of us to come together and just be women, because we are predominantly women in this group, although we're not exclusive, but we are predominantly women, and just share, you know, be able to share those moments where you feel like, is it all worth it? Am I on the right path? Should I be doing this? Am I any good? All of those, you know, little negative conversations that might pop up, and to be supported, to laugh, to celebrate one another. Because again, it's very challenging sometimes to celebrate those wins. So it's allowed me to do that. The other example is, which I'm really excited about, is connecting with a health coach who's running an online summit globally, and being asked to participate as one of the panelists. So
Oh, wonderful.
I know it's super exciting. And you know, it opens you up to possibilities and things you might never have thought were there for you. Because it's that connection, it's that community, it's that tribe. And I'm lucky, I feel very blessed actually, that, you know, I do know so many incredible women who are now part of my life. Because if I think back to my corporate world, they were in very male dominated areas of medicine and law. So I was used to dealing with men. I'd never really had much to do with women. They were kind of strange to me. And now suddenly it's almost, well, it has swung completely to the opposite end of the spectrum. And most of my life, most of my work is with women. And they're endlessly fascinating.
Isn't it funny that so often out in society we get taught that, you know, women are backstabbing bitches and you've got to watch out for her, and there's
Mm,
all of this idea of high school like behavior that the world is a competition.
mm,
And yet when we find these beautiful groups of women who are coming from that same perspective, they really embody the idea that the raising tide raises all the boats.
absolutely.
And it is so different from the messaging that we get through a lot of TV shows, through a lot of our media,
Mm,
whether it be, you know, movies, TV, social media. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts I've gotten as well through this, is really being able to connect with like-minded people. And especially through podcasting, I have met both men and women who are just on that path of non-competitive, collaborative co-creation, which is
Yes.
magical. So I
It
love that
is.
you brought that up. I think is
Mm.
absolutely incredible.
Well, I think that's where we do create the magic. As you say, if you we don't need to compete against one another. That really brings in that whole area of scarcity. There is more than enough of everything in the world for all of us. And when you tap into that sort of mindset of abundance, of celebration, of joy, of collaboration, I love collaborating with people. It's just when you bring your zone of genius together with their zone of genius, then incredible things can happen and you can change lives. And you have a much greater impact than just you yourself.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it's so beautifully put. The other thing that I have noticed you've dropped in throughout this conversation is celebration. So you mentioned it, when you were first entering into that health coaching journey of looking back and looking at your dad's life and your son's life and the life you'd built with your husband, and that self-reflective aspect, which I also take to be that celebration. How important do you think both self-reflection and celebration have been in you becoming the person you are today?
Oh, I don't think I'd be this person if I hadn't. And I think I should point out that a lot of this has happened almost incidentally, and coming across sort of the right opportunities and the right people when I needed them, and being aware enough and open enough to allow them to evolve. Um, you know, having a sense of curiosity and questioning and learning, taking on board, conversations that we've had, thinking about, you might make an offhand comment, but to me that will land and it will set me off on a whole range of other thoughts. And so I'll sit and I'll think, about how that applies to me and what can I take from that and what can I change. And you might be talking with somebody and they'll mention a book. So you'll go and have a look at the book, and this book can change your life because it sets you off again on this other path. And just through that, with things like all the lockdowns that we had here in Melbourne, I sat in a puddle of gratitude throughout that whole thing. And yes, it impacted my mental health in ways I wouldn't have anticipated and everything else. But looking at the fact that, where can I bring the gratitude in here? Where can I bring in that we're okay, we're doing okay, I'm grateful for that. And as you know, when you are grateful, then there generally tends to be things to celebrate. And I think too, having a personal experience of a very close friend of mine who at the very early age of 43 just didn't wake up one morning. Every morning now, if I wake up, I am very grateful because not everybody does it. And I think we don't celebrate enough. And I certainly in my life haven't celebrated enough. Even sometimes, if I think back to, as I said, those days when you wake up and you can barely string two thoughts together, we don't stop at the end of the day to think, yay me, I got through another day. Yes, it was hard. Yes, it was shitty. Yes, I have no idea how I did it, but I did it. And I think just those simple thoughts can change a lot.
Absolutely. No, I think that is beautifully wise words. So thank you so much for sharing that. I agree. I think that there are so many times in our lives that we forget that celebration aspect. We're often looking at the next goal when we've achieved the last one, or when we've gotten to a certain point that we've been looking forward to. We're already on to the next thing before we've appreciated where we've gotten to. And it's certainly been a practice that has absolutely changed my life as well. So thank you so much for that. And because of the name of the podcast, what does being a divine messy human mean to you?
What does it mean to me? It just means, I don't know that I can put it into words, because I kind of feel like it describes me to a T. Yes, I am very messy. I, in more ways than one, I enjoy my food when I eat. And oftentimes my husband will come up and he'll kind of go, "What's going out there, honey?" But it's, life is divine. Humans are divine. I often marvel at the wonders of the human body and what it can do when we just let it, when we just give it what it needs. It is divine. When you go outside and just sit on the grass and just let your mind go, and you've got blue skies, trees, birds singing, the cat tangling himself up around me, to me, that's all part of being human. And life is messy. It is shitful sometimes, shitfully messy. It can be horrible sometimes. But I think that's all part and parcel of being human. And it's about how you manage that. So to me, divine messy human means, really, that's just who I am.
Beautiful.
And
Thank
it
you.
allows me to bring me out.
Oh, thank you so, so much. It has been an honor. As you know, we could talk all day. We often do.
Yep.
So how can people find you, and what have you got coming up?
Oh, so exciting. So I'm going to be a panelist on this global summit, which is all around menopause. And I'm going to be talking about the postmenopausal years, because again, there are no conversations around the, yes, we stop having our periods, we hit menopause, and then, we just imagine life will go on. But there are certain things that can happen to you postmenopausally that we aren't necessarily aware of. And let me tell you, they can be a little bit tricky to navigate. So I'm going to be talking about that, and also about women's brain health, which is a big passion of mine at the minute, because again, we're not having conversations around the fact that women generally make up 2/3 of all Alzheimer's diagnoses.
Yeah.
And why? What's going on there? We're more likely to have depression, more likely to have anxiety. So that's what I'm going to be talking about there. I've got my sugar detox program coming up again in June. I am about to redo my website, and I'll have some new programs coming up on there. So have a look for it. You'll find me at preservethegoddess.com. And I'm on Instagram as Preserve the Goddess as well.
Fantastic. Well, I will put all of your links in the show notes. Just thank you from the bottom of my heart. I love you so much. And I'm so grateful that you're out there and shining your light and helping women who really, really need it. So thank you.
Oh, my darling friend. No, thank you. You are an absolute joy to this world. What you do, what you bring, how you change lives. You are an absolute gift. And I love that we're soul sisters, and I love you to bits. So thank you.
Oh, back at you. Mwah.